Germany, late 1944. The war is basically lost. But in one last effort to turn it all around, there's a telegram that goes out to all the big aircraft manufacturers for a new fighter jet. And it says, design a single-engine daytime jet fighter out of wood and steel. Top speed 750 kph, usable from field airstrips, 2 cannons with pilot armor. You have 5 days. Right, let me take you through that story. I'm taking you back here to 1944. Germany is losing the war, and to avert the inevitable, it puts in place multiple emergency programs. Amongst these are a complete turnaround in aircraft production and philosophy, really, with the introduction of jet fighters. The objective for Germany here was to regain so-called control of the air superiority over the Reich, and it had to put an end to daytime Allied bombing and to Allied interdiction and to Allied close air support. And that was a big target to achieve. In 1944, the Luftwaffe made that late switch, where institutionally it finally accepted that it must stop focusing on an offensive bomber fleet and switch production to fighters. And from the piston fighter it switched over very quickly to the jet aircraft, the most famous of which is of course the Messerschmitt Me 262. Yet there was one problem with this aircraft. It had been designed with the assumption that Germany could rely on its traditional manufacturing, factories, techniques and skilled workers. This turned out to be a problem, even as Germany built up a vast decentralized production network in the south of Germany to build those Me 262s. And this is where the Heinkel He 162 comes in. This aircraft, sometimes referred to as the Volksjäger, or People's Fighter, was to remedy this situation. It was to be a cheap, mass-produced, low-maintenance machine, easy to fly for pilots with little to no training, and as a jet, possess a unique technological advantage. With this aircraft, Germany would be able to quickly field a large fleet of jets that could wrestle back air superiority over the Reich and provide that breathing space that it needed. At least in theory. Let's go through this in turn, largely following the points I have set out here. Development time of the different planes and engines of course varies, and here we can see that the urgency for the Heinkel 162 certainly produced a very quick result, although of course Heinkel had worked on jets beforehand. For the Me 262, this project goes back to 1939. The first flight with only jet engine is then in July 1942, and series production slowly starts in March 1944, but it doesn't really take off until the second half of the year. The Heinkel 162, on the other hand, had been developed very quickly. The program was launched on September 11, 1944, and Heinkel's design was accepted on September 24, 1944. So basically within 2 weeks. The first flight was on December 6th of that year, whereas series production, depending on how you want to count it, begins in January 1945. But then let's look at the different jet engines as well, because they're an integral part of the aircraft. For the Jumo 004 engines that were used on the Me 262, development starts in December 1939. The first production versions appear in 1943, but true series production only starts in August 1944. Whereas for the Heinkel 162's BMW 003 engine, the dates are 1939 and October 1944 respectively. Thus we can see that while the development of the Heinkel 162 was quick in comparison to the Me 262, its engines took slightly longer. Also, the BMW engine was behind the Jumo engine in terms of quality and reliability. The main advantage of the Heinkel 162 was its low production hours and costs compared to the Me 262. While the Heinkel 162 was about half as expensive as the Me 262, in terms of production hours, 6 could be produced for every Me 262. And then you add to this in parallel 700 work hours per Jumo 04 engine for the Me 262 for a total of 1,400 hours for 2 engines because the aircraft needed 2 engines. For the BMW jet engine of the Heinkel 162, we have 500 to 600 work hours. In terms of airframe production, the 162 got to a later start than the 262, but we can see how production ramps up a lot quicker and is set to bypass the Messerschmitt jet by the end of the war. Then let's have a look at the engines. The ME 262 of course had that Jumo 004 engine, whereas the Heinkel 162 had the BMW 003. And here we start seeing an issue as the BMW engine got off to a late start. Regarding these figures, K and Nowarra indicate slightly different figures and breakdowns, but this provides us with an overall appreciation of the situation. It also shows us that the Heinkel 162 program received fewer BMW engines than the Arado 234. Again, 2 engines versus 1 per plane, meaning that actually in reality more Heinkel 162s could be completed than Arado 234s, even though the Arado line got more engines. Now you may ask, with the vast quantity of Jumo 04 engines available, why weren't they used in the Volksjäger? There are many reasons, including production deficiencies and that the Jumo 04 was initially reserved for the ME 262 and the Arado 234. Both planes needed 2 engines, thus the higher production numbers can easily fool us into thinking that more were available when actually there was a bigger draw on them as well. However, this also changed as eventually parts of the BMW production went to Arado with the 003A engine, while the Volksjäger got the 003E, thus splitting the BMW production into 2 planes. So on paper, the ME 262 was the better jet, no question about it. And any closer inspection of these aircraft, their blueprints, as well as their records that survive, will absolutely support this statement. But it can't be ignored that the Heinkel 162 was, from a production standpoint, much more in line with the need to produce a vast quantity of jets quickly. As you may expect, there was also some strife between the Messerschmitt and the Heinkel companies based on all of this. And if you're interested in that, I recommend you to watch my previous video on that, because it's a topic I can't get into now. It's gonna pop up this side, yeah. Talking about recommendations, check out this book on the Heinkel HE162 by Dan Sharp. It's a solid choice to read up on many things related to the Volksjäger, with plenty of new stuff in here as well. And I especially like how the book not just references the sources. I mean, that should really be a standard in all history books, even though some publishers don't really do that, which is bizarre to me, but you know, that's another topic. But more often than not, it also shows the sources, and that resonates with me a lot, as my own books and my own videos follow the exact same principle of putting you as the viewer or reader in touch with the original source material, yeah? And the publisher of this book, Mortons, has a lot of books on World War II aircraft, and you can get them all at 10% off all year round with my discount code. That also includes the new reprint of the Dan Sharp's ME 262 books as well. So check out the recommendations I have in the description and use that code to save yourself some money. Do I need to market this anymore? No, of course not. I think you know if you want books or not. And if you want them, get them at 10% off or not. I mean, that's your choice. I don't really have to waste your time on the whole marketing spiel. You know how this works, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, of course you can also get my books via the links that are in the description as well. But enough on that. Back to the content. Okay, so we saw the production figures, and of course we can speculate about the production potential of both planes had Germany not surrendered, but I covered that in a past video, so I won't retrace those steps here. What I want to do instead is have a discussion on how the Heinkel 162 entered service in the Luftwaffe. Because remember, while the jet ticks off the boxes of cheap and mass production, it leaves us with the question whether it was sound as an operational weapon system. I'll break this down into a couple of parts, namely operational numbers, design simplicity, pilots and flying, as well as technology. Regarding operational numbers, very few Heinkel 162s ever got a chance to be used in combat. Very, very few. Less than 300 were ever completed. I mean, that's airframe plus engine merged into one, right? Although deliveries started to Jagdgeschwader 1, that was to use the plane. Those deliveries started sort of in February 1945. Conversion training was seriously hampered by Allied air raids and just the complete disconnect that the Luftwaffe had at this point. Yeah, at the beginning of April 45, when the Heinkel 162 first saw combat, less than a dozen were actually on the roster of Jagdgeschwader 1. And when the air bases started to be overrun by Allied troops, that problem was still the same, with only about 20 to 25 Heinkel 162s being judged airworthy enough to be then evaluated by the Allies. And they went to the UK, to France, to the US, and so on. The Heinkel 162 was a very simple machine. That was the purpose after all. And you can see it in the production standards. I mean, just look at it. Everything was minimalist, with push rods holding hatches in place, cables and lines being bare bone, and a lot of pilot conveniences at the time were done away with for the simplest solution. Like for the front gear, the pilot checks visually whether it was retractive through a small window rather than relying on an instrument indicator. For the weapons too, the installation gave easy access to the 20mm cannons and their ammo. The gear well provided access to some of the internals, and the overall complexity was very low if you look at the aircraft in any detail. This was deliberate and yes, made the aircraft easy to maintain. However, the limitations of this showed due to poor production standards and corner cutting that placed risks on the safe operation of the aircraft that were on display time and time again. So all in all, the design achieved its objective of being low cost and low maintenance, comparatively speaking. But that of course comes at the associated costs that we would expect from exactly that type of aircraft. You'll remember that one of the main requirements for the Heinkel 162 was to have a simple machine that could be flown by pilots with absolutely minimal training. However, many of the pilots that were initially selected to fly the plane were not novices at all. However, their conversion training was very slow. Between January and March 1945, a good number of pilots had yet to fly the Heinkel 162, even though the planes were available on paper at some airfield. It also transpired that the aircraft was really not easy to fly. This was not just due to frequent failures to the engine, the gear or the weapons, but it was also due to a combination of speed, maneuverability and precarious landing and takeoff performance and the engine's poor negative G performance. And thus the Heinkel 162 was critically unforgiving on the pilot. You'll maybe remember that Erich Winkel-Brown, the most prolific and experienced pilot who probably ever lived, is sometimes quoted as having been fond of the Heinkel 162's flying qualities. However, considering what he and a lot of other pilots have said, the positives they highlight are, in my belief, often taken completely out of context. And when they speak favorably of the plane's speed and the roll rate, that is actually a sign that for a novice pilot, the 162 would have been quite a handful. Now that's a big topic for another video that I'm most likely going to make somewhere down the line, but it is relevant here to cover this aspect. If you are interested to see how, for example, plane evaluations often highlight different aspects as positives or negatives, depending on who is testing the plane, even the sort of the same aspect being judged positively and negatively, then watch my video on the Japanese evaluation of the German Bf 109. The final discussion here is on the technological advantage of the plane. Considering the build quality, this comes down to one single aspect: the engine. Sure enough, you can also make a case for the ejection seat, as yes, the plane did feature a first generation ejection system because of the engine and wing placement, but basically it's a jet, and that's where we identify that technological advantage of the time over the piston engine. And as a jet, the Heinkel 162 did have what we would generally consider a technological advantage, and its paper performance was impressive. However, the BMW 003 engine had its share of problems that neutralized much of the nominal advantage. Yes, in dogfights you'd be benefiting from high performance, but operationally the engine was a headache due to problems ranging from randomly cutting out, to failures of the variable nozzle leading to critical losses in thrust, to a very high fuel consumption. At low altitude, the plane would basically be out of fuel within 15 minutes. And at higher altitudes and with some fuel management, of course, that could be extended to 30 to 45 minutes. However, as the Heinkel 162 then was barely used at these higher altitudes, this appears to be largely a moot point in reality. Let's put all of this together then by looping back to the beginning of this video. So the Heinkel 162 was intended to be a cheap, mass-produced, low-maintenance machine, easy to fly for pilots with little to no training, and as a jet possess a unique technological advantage. From the evidence we have, the plane certainly ticks off the first box. An argument can also be made that it would have eventually ticked off the second, but considering the low numbers of 162s that became operational, we are here in the low 2 digits, there can be no doubt that production potential and operational use were completely out of balance. It also appears to be low maintenance in many ways, but it's a bit of a mixed bag considering the complexity and the quality of the plane's engines. And from what we know, it was not an easy plane to fly at all. Going against its initial purpose and beyond the low operational numbers, we can have severe doubts as to whether Germany would even have had enough pilots once mass production was on the way. This was the one aspect that even the planners of the Heinkel 162 were never able to answer. Where do all these pilots come from? The same consideration could be given to fuel or available operational bases, but that would take us into other aspects. Finally, the technological advantage. I feel like there is always that temptation to consider a jet in World War II immediately superior to a piston aircraft, and sure, on paper I agree. Considering the operational record of the BMW 003 engine, however, I would argue that this engine was not yet ready for operational combat conditions, and a lot of problems and accidents happened because of this. As such, never mind the advantage it may have given in a rare tactical engagement, the potential of this engine is cancelled out by the aircraft's operational record. Now, what do you think of the Heinkel 162? Was it a rational choice? Was it too late? Was it a pipe dream? A wasteful and disgraceful attempt at a last-ditch Wunderwaffle? Well, let me know all about what you think in the description below. And if you are as big a fan of getting in touch with the original documents, primary sources, and want to see what was said at the time, consider supporting the channel via Patreon or channel membership, subscribing, doing the liking, the whole YouTube mumbo jumbo. This funds my research and filming trips so I can make more content for all of you. Also, I showed you a lot of footage from museums that I filmed at. You can watch those episodes here, I have them all in the description. And also make sure that you visit your local aviation museums in your area, because for many of these places, that's what keeps them alive. Pass by the gift shop on the way out as well. It really helps those places. As always, have a great day. Big thank you here to Andrew for his fire support on the script. And as always, have a great day and see you in the sky.